Sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Buenas noches. The Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Service, Self-Determination, Historic Preservation, Public Accountability on the Guam Buildup, and Committee on Emergency Response, Military, Veterans Affairs, Border Safety, and Mayor's Council Joint Information Briefing is called to order. The time currently is 10:30 a.m., Monday, June 10, 2024. Notice of this hearing was provided to all senators, stakeholders, and local media on June 3rd and June 8, 2024, thus meeting the requirements for the open government law. In addition to this, hearing was also posted and available on the Guam Legislature's website. Materials for this informational briefing hearing were shared to the committee drive and are available for print upon request. It is my understanding that it was just the report has just been released at 10:30, so we will be having printouts for my colleagues shortly. Recording for today's hearing will also be available online via Guam Legislature's website and YouTube. For signing convenience, there is a QR code at the entrance. Joining me is my joint hearing oversight, Mr. Senator Nicholas and Mr. Joseph Augustine, Senator Jesse Lujan, and Senator Frank Blas. Yeah. I'd like to first provide some rules of conduct for those in attendance. The conduct of this hearing should be as follows. Individuals speaking shall only use respectful and professional language and conduct. Personal interference about the character or motive of any senator or any individual is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order removal from the hearing or the subcommittee of any person who is not a member of the Guam and who fails to observe proper decorum according to the 37th Guam Legislature Standing Rules. All must abide by this rules of conduct for quality assurance and standards. Before speaking, please introduce yourself by stating your name, job title, or organization you are representing, or yourself. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. This joint informational briefing is conducted at the request of the OPA Office of Public Accountability for the purpose of presenting OPA Report Number 24-07, Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense Operating Costs. At this time, I'll call on Speaker BJ Cruz to present his findings and his team. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank you and Chairman Nicholas for agreeing to call this joint hearing. It's not the usual way that we do our presentations to you, but I did follow one protocol that you've insisted on, and that was not printing. I'm sorry. I should have made mention that all the members should have shown up with their computers so that they can see it as it goes up. I'm hoping that it has gone up. Anyway, I also want to thank Senator Frank Blas. Last fall, I was sitting in my office and he called and he said, are you available? And I said, yes. He said, can you come upstairs? This is much bigger than I can handle. I went to his office and he was meeting with a constituent who was a whistleblower reporting on the operations at the Guam Homeland Security and Office of Civil Defense. And we were told at that point that an external audit firm had been doing an audit of the office, and that the findings would be fairly grave. Unfortunately, the timing was just wrong for our office. It was November, and every single one of my auditor ones was involved in, was already engaged in an audit, and all of my threes were engaged with overseeing audits of the 9 audits that were being prepared. We were hoping to get them out by the end of the year, but unfortunately some of them took longer, and so between November and the end of February we released 9 audits. 6 of them were in this calendar year. This is the first performance audit to be released since February because they've all had other projects. As soon as they were all free, I put together this team, actually overseen by my accountability auditor supervisor, Mr. Vincent Duenas. He doesn't usually act as since he got the new position as supervisor, doesn't usually serve as a audit supervisor in any audits. But in this one, I asked him because of what I thought would be the severity of the findings, that I asked him if he would come back in and oversee the preparation and the finalization of this. I also have Ms. Marianne Manglonia, who is my CPA, Ms. Joy Esperanza, who did most of the writing, and Ms. Mariela Cruz, who did a lot of the research. I'm very proud of this team. They not only did some research, awaiting word from the Office of Civil Defense. We engaged the governor's office sometime in late February. We scheduled a meeting in March and had our engagement, our first meeting with the office in March, and gave them a list of things that we documents that we wanted. Unfortunately, they delayed the issuance of all those documents. We thought it would be easy since they had already gone through a couple of audits and all of that information should have been readily available. Unfortunately, we didn't receive it until May. But when we received it in May, the team made the decision that it was imperative, and probably we had an obligation to this legislature to come directly to you to tell you what we had found preliminarily, because the findings were such that you needed to know, especially you needed to know as you are preparing for the budget hearings later this month and the finalization of the budget later on this year. Again, thank you all for being here. I'm hoping that it's up, but at this point, since I wasn't the one that really wrote it, this team, and they were working all weekend and into the night last night trying to finalize it, because the process at the office is you have to have a quality assurance and you have to have a cold read, and the cold read didn't finish until 8 o'clock last night. And Vince was making final changes and preparing the press release. So let me turn it over to Vincent, who will do the presentation.
Can I just have a moment real quick? I'd just like to recognize my colleague, Senator Joanne Brown, for joining us today as well. Good morning. And then you can proceed back.
Okay,
real quick. Right, colleagues, we're still printing the packets, more than 100 pages, so it's being printed in
it's
next door, and it should be coming
pages.
over. Okay. Thank you, Speaker. You can continue, Mr. Duenas.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Senators. My name is Vincent Duenas. I am the Supervising Accountability Auditor with the EOPA. I've been with the office for going on 22 years now, or since 2002, 2003, around that time frame. So, like BJ mentioned, he put together a really good team with this. There's a lot of experience. We have a CPA who has experience in tax auditing, performance auditing, and financial auditing. We have a CGFM, a Certified Government Financial Manager, who has experience in performance auditing and auditing in the Guam public school system. Both come with 15 plus years of experience. And of course, we have our rising star in Mariela down there. She's a incoming CPA. She's currently working on that. So like the public auditor mentioned, there's a lot of good people working on this audit. For the purpose of today's the informational briefing that we wanted to provide, our common practice is to actually go to the oversight chair of the agency that is the auditee, and also the oversight chair of our oversight chair, Senator Quinata. And what we do is we give them, a quick PowerPoint presentation on the findings of our audits and stuff like that. But however, this one we felt it warranted an audience like this, where it's in the public, where everyone could see, so that action can be taken. Because as I go through the executive summary, I'm going to read it into the record so that nothing's missed, and that you guys can make whatever decisions need to be made as our fiscal purse in the government of Guam. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read it into record. The Office of Public Accountability's investigative audit on the Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense's operating costs revealed that $8.4 million in federal reimbursements have not been received by the general fund because the Federal Emergency Management Agency placed grant restrictions due to GHS OCD's repeated non-compliance with federal guidelines and regulations. Despite claiming 100% federally funding for its operations, GHC OCD management and their certifying officers were aware of these FEMA-placed restrictions. Operating costs included expenditures of the government of Guam funds that were not appropriated to GHS OCD or otherwise authorized by the Guam legislature. We identified several documents, and we included all of those documents as attachments to our 142-page report. Some of these documents include gubernatorial administration transition reports. We found one as early as 2011 and 2018. Those are the two most recent ones. We found FEMA monitoring reports, internal audits done by the Guam Department of Administration, and federal audits conducted by Guam or Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, and the Department of Interior Office of Inspector General. And what these audits and documents identified was that they were notifying current and past management and administrations of GHS OCD's grants administration issues since at least 2011. These documents have repeatedly warned that if corrective action is not taken, then there is a potential danger of GHS OCD losing its federal funding. These non-compliance issues were caused by a lack of consistent GHS OCD leadership and a qualified fiscal and grants management team. GHS OCD's mission is crucial as they respond to all types of emergencies in order to protect lives, environment, and property of the island of Guam. However, its current environment is at high risk for mismanagement. Again, as the public auditor mentioned, this investigative audit was prompted by a hotline concern received by the public auditor himself regarding the administration of federal grants at the Homeland Security OCD. Due to the urgency of this matter, delays in responses to our requests for management, and limited access to our records, our office is obligated to report our initial findings to the immediate attention of oversight officials for corrective action. A second audit is currently ongoing on the appropriateness of their expenditures. However, as I mentioned, we needed to bring this out to the attention now. Going into our first finding that GHS OCD owes $8.4 million to the general fund. The general fund has been basically paying for GHD OCD's operating costs. FEMA placed a hold on two grants, the Homeland Security Grant Program, the HSGP, and the Emergency Management Performance Grant, or the EMPG. They placed a hold on the reimbursements to the general fund. As of February 16, 2024, DOA reported that GHS OCD owed $8.4 million to the general fund for unreimbursed expenditures. Overall, the general fund has paid $71.3 million in expenditures for their operations, FEMA recovery, and tsunami grant programs. However, was only reimbursed $62.9. That's the difference that they placed a hold on. Of the $8.4 million, $7.8 are for operations under these two programs that have yet to be reimbursed. And of that 7.8, 6.3 million were for grants that expired in August 2019 and September 2023. And then of these expired grants, the general fund spent more than the grant award for 8 grants totaling $910,000. These over expenditures were actually supported by DOA's internal audit section's findings on the lack of monitoring budget and system controls. Since the general fund is owed $8.4 million, a determination is needed for whether or not the general fund would be reimbursed by federal funds. Expenditures continue to be incurred without corresponding federal reimbursements. Such expenditures would require certification of availability of funds and management approval. In our second finding, 100% federally funded. From FY 2018 to FY 2023, the Office of the Governor's budget request amounts did not include GHS OCDs, even though they're listed as a program. Based on the appropriations laws from this period, there were no direct local appropriations to GHS OCD. However, the appropriations laws authorize all departments to spend appropriated funds and for the governor to transfer appropriations from the governor's office to Guam Homeland Security and not GHS OCD for matching requirements of federal grants. If GHS OCD staff are 100% federally funded, a local fund match of equal amount would be 100%. The general fund is also subject to the governor's transfer authority up to a certain percentage unless otherwise restricted or specifically allowed by the General Appropriations Act. Then the last finding we had was that GHS OCD is in danger of losing its federal funding. FEMA is required to conduct at least a biennial, that means every other year, 2 years, a programmatic and financial review of all preparedness grants, such as the HSGP and the EMPG. FEMA's March 2016 on-site monitoring review listed 11 areas of non-compliance with federal program guidelines and regulations. Most of the deficiencies were areas of non-compliance from the FY 2014 U.S. Department of Homeland Security Office of the Inspector General Audit that remain unaddressed. In 2018, FEMA conducted another on-site monitoring review that contained areas of concern with regards to GHS OCD's grants management, of which corrective actions were pending as of February 2019. FEMA also conducted monitoring visits in 2020, 22, and 2024, just this past April, on GHS OCD's accounting of grant funds, documented policies, and procedures and expenditures. And that most recent visit, I do believe they're due for another, the report should be coming out this month, actually. So we'll see probably some of the similar findings that they've had in the past. The unaddressed repeat findings and causes resulted in the freezing of federal reimbursements. The freeze indicates how risky it is for the federal government to continue to invest in GHS OCD. Despite this, the general fund continues to support GHS OCD's mission. FEMA's ongoing concerns about their ability to properly manage and administer federal grant awards prompted them to contract a private auditing firm, Premier Audit Group Services, Inc., to conduct a program-specific audit. The audit was released in May of 2024. It issued a disclaimer of opinion. And what a disclaimer of opinion does is basically they separated themselves from actually making an opinion because of their inability to confirm whether or not and verify the costs that were incurred by GHS OCD, as well as determine whether the costs were allowable and allocable. As a result, question costs totaled $34.7 million and is subject to FEMA's decision whether or not to sustain the findings and have GHS OCD repay disallowed costs, which means that the taxpayers of Guam would be the ones that have to foot that bill. In conclusion, GHS OCD continues to be funded by the general fund without direct local appropriations, despite the lack of full reimbursement from FEMA due to noncompliance. As a result, unrealized revenues of $8.4 million existed as of February 2024. Although federal funds make costly initiatives happen, GovGuam should not rely on federal funding alone if it cannot ensure compliance. We believe GHS OCD's mission is very critical. Their mission of protecting the people of Guam from man-made and natural disasters needs to be supported. However, its current environment is at high risk for mismanagement and continued mismanagement, if not urgently addressed. We did make 2 recommendations to the governor's office, because she's the one that we engaged with this audit with, to work directly with the legislature to determine whether or not to appropriate or authorize local funding directly to GHS OCD. So Senator San Agustin, this might have a play in the current budget discussions that you're having. Then also our second recommendation was to immediately address the causes identified in these prior audits, the monitoring reviews, and transition reports to mitigate the risk of losing 100% of GHS OCD's federal funding. As is common practice with all of our audits, we do seek the response from management, and we did include that in the copy of our audit in Appendix 10. By the way, all of these, everything that I had just read and the actual full 142-page report is on our website at www.opaguam.org, and it was also transmitted this morning to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and of course all senators, so it should be in your inbox right now. In their management response, the OCD administrator concurred with our recommendations and provided a proposed corrective action plan. We commend GHS OCD for preparing the plan, as it reflects their commitment to addressing the issues identified in the audit report. The legislation creating the OPA requires agencies to prepare a corrective action plan, document their progress, and implement the recommendations no later than the beginning of next fiscal year. And with that, I read into the record the executive summary of the Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense Operating Cost Series. I'm now going to turn it back to the public auditor for his closing.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Senators, when you read the report, you'll see all of the attachments, the transition reports from the beginning of the Calvert administration, the transition report from the beginning of the Leon Guerrero administration, telling them that there were problems at GHS OCD since 2011. Both administrations knew it going in and had it in their transition reports. There are, we've provided you with copies of the OIG reports from 2011 and 2014. We provided you with the cover pages from the Department of Administration's October 2022 internal audit, talking about the fact that there was $6.4 million that was due then, and it's now 8.3. The only thing that we could not include as an attachment in this was a copy of the premier audit. As members of the legislature, you might be able to petition or write to the Department of FEMA for a copy. We were provided with a copy of it, but we were told we could only reference it in our report, but we could not include it as an attachment and an appendix in our report. We were asked not to. And so we were unable to do that. But they went through at least a dozen areas at GHS OCD where they were unable to find or be provided with documents to explain the expenditures that were made, which is the reason why their recommendation was $34.7 in question costs. When we read that on May the 10th, we made the decision as a team that we had to come to you immediately we were hoping maybe it was before you guys passed legislation last week to give $30 million away to GPA, because that might have been necessary at least to keep. But this is it. And so we thought that it was imperative that we get this to you at the earliest possible date. The executive summary is very well written. The body of the report's only about 30 pages. The rest of it is appendices. I really want to commend Mr. Esteves, the administrator of Civil Defense, the management response that he was tasked to report to give us. If you want to read what the issues are in the agencies, in the agency, read his appendix. I think it's 10. Read his response, because in it he lists all the issues, and it's on charts and it's very well presented. And then it also explains things that they need to do. And it's our hope, besides commending them, it's our hope that they'll be able to follow through in what they've set forth in this corrective action plan. They listed all of the problems. I think there must have been about 40 of them, and then broke them down into areas that needed to be addressed, and it is very well presented. And so if you want to read something shorter than our report, there's it listed in bullet points of the problems that were pointed out in every one of the appendices that we provided. And so I just wanted to make mention of that. At that, we stand ready to respond, or if you want to break to read the report and call us back, we are ready to come back at any time that you want us to respond to questions, but we're here today.
I'll just have AV put us in recess for real quick. AV? Apologies for that brief recess. I just want to thank my colleagues for their patience and understanding. Mr. Speaker, at this time, we'll go ahead and have one round of questions with all the colleagues, and I'll go in order of their incoming. But I'll yield to Senator Siniclis for questions at this time or concerns.
Good morning, panel. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I wish I had this way before I actually sat down for it, but it's on our lap as it is. So the 30-some million dollars that you mentioned, is that a cumulative over several years, or is this, yeah, could you please explain that?
Yes, it is. It's their findings for the period 2015 to 2022. They went through and tried to audit that period. Unfortunately, GHS OCD was unable to provide them with enough documentation as evidence of their expenditures. That is the reason why they issued a disclaimer as opposed to an unmodified, which is a clean opinion, or a modified because of some problem. They just said, this is impossible. And the management response that was received, that's in the report, if and when any of you are able to get a copy of it, the management response was that, yes, they understand that there's these issues, but they didn't provide any proof, no documentation to disprove the findings that were made by Premier. So Premier, when it published the report in May of last month, it said, we understand your response, but in as much as you provided us nothing in which to reevaluate our initial finding, we're going to stick to our finding. So as a consequence, between 2015 and 2022, they found $34.7 million worth of question costs. And that's only to 2022. That doesn't include 23 or 24.
Right, moving forward, yeah. This Homeland Security is fully funded by the feds. Is that correct?
When I was chairman in 2018, the report, the budget document that was sent to the committee was 100% federally funded. And as I understand, at least, and we've checked every executive budget submission since 2018, and all of them have said 100% federally funded. They knew that the restriction was imposed in 2018, but continued to list the agency as 100% federally funded. And I personally don't know how they're signing certifications of funds, but I'm hoping somebody will be able to explain how that's done.
So management...
But Department of Administration did an audit in 2022 and determined at that point that there was $6.3 million in non-refunded expenditures, and then they have told us that as of February, it's gone up to 8.4. We don't know how much it is now that it's June, maybe 9, and what's going to be at the end of this year and going forward. So we just thought we had to stop the hemorrhaging, and we had to notify you at the earliest possible date. And because we have our internal processes that require that we review the documents, we have to have a QAR within the office. It has to be code red. These people were up all weekend trying to get this ready so that it can be presented this morning.
So since 2015, the Homeland Security has not been forthcoming with and cooperating with audits that were being done, or?
I can't say that, Mr. Chairman. They've had biannual audits, And so I'm sure they were responding to them, but the problem that at least in the Premier report, was stating that they either had no documentation to explain why it was, they were charging the wrong program for expenditures, there was people working in both programs and the time was being charged incorrectly. There were expenditures that they couldn't explain, and thus the disclaimer and the recommendation, the finding of $34.7 million in question cost.
Wow. So how do you spend all this money and have nothing to show for? You know, it's very disheartening for me to hear this at this time. You know.
And when you read the report, you'll find that the problem that they've been having at both department agencies is that their FFRs, their federal financial reports, weren't being filed, or weren't being filed timely, or weren't being filed at all. And their program financial reports that were due at the end of the year weren't being filed either. And they've had warnings since 2009, actually. You have to be religious about your filing of these reports. And they haven't been, unfortunately. So consequently, Premier was brought in to do a study of 15 to 22, and that was their finding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I will definitely have a public hearing on this, and I have nothing further. Thank you for being here and being very forthcoming with all the stuff, your findings, and really appreciate it. And pretty sure the people of Guam appreciate this as well. I think a fix is in order. Thank you, sir.
And as we said, this is just the first part. There's going to be, we're going to try to figure out what the expenditures were and why their question cost. And we should be issuing that sometime before the end of the year. I hope sooner than that, but we're going through the tranche of information that has been provided to us and see if we can find documentation that Premier couldn't find or didn't see. I don't know. I'm hoping that that we can help GHS OCD provide FEMA with documentation to prove that some of these expenditures can be and should be reimbursed. But we haven't gone through that yet. And so that'll be the second one. We may have a third because in the financial audits for the government of Guam, we discovered that there's this interesting line. It's called receivable from the federal government. And the amount in that has ranged from $34 million to 17 and 15. And we don't know if those are other programs and other departments that are not getting their full reimbursement, though the government of Guam has been fronting the expenditures. And so that'll probably be a third audit that will come as a result of this.
Is this something that you've seen in other agencies, or is this just Homeland Security?
Well, this is the first time that we've seen it. But the thing is that now that we see this receivable from the federal government, we don't know if there's other agencies. And I may have to revise my constant plea to you guys of adequately paying accountants and auditors we may need to expand that because of the millions, not billions of dollars that we receive from the federal government. We're going to need to train our, whatever name they have, either the ASOs of the departments or the program coordinators in departments that handle the federal programs, or grants managers, they have to get training. They have to figure out how to handle these programs, because otherwise there'll be question cost. I think you could have seen that in 2 of the last financial audits that were just released. Yesterday, the UOG audit went out. And though the newspaper made a big deal about the fact that there was some question cost, the question cost was an absolute fraction of the federal funds that UOG received. They received $61 million in federal grants last year, which was phenomenal. And their question cost was, I think, $1,500. Whereas GPA, which was issued last week, had only $1.5 million in in federal programs that was audited, and they had a high question cost because they weren't turning in the reports. Reports are required, and failures to provide the reports places all the agencies in jeopardy of not receiving the grants that they're supposed to be getting. And worse, if the reports aren't eventually submitted, it could mean that $34.7 million is going to be found as the question cost. And now FEMA is weighing the decision on whether or not it's going to ask for repayment or do something. We don't know what they're going to do, which is the reason why they asked us not to publish the entire report in ours. But they are now weighing their decision on what they have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Nicolas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Joseph Hochstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Auditor Speaker Cruz, thank you for the report. Wish we had this a week ago or so, but nonetheless, it's today. We move forward from there. When you identified 2015, it's actually 2009. Just glancing over your report, it's even further back to 2005. I'm happy that the chair is gonna, it's an information briefing. I need to go over this report because I have to know when it started to multiply, because 34 don't happen overnight. It's quite obvious. It takes years to grow to 34. Then, because you mentioned also here, it's 8.3. Today is 8.3. But from 2005 to today, it could equate to 34.7. It could equate because, and the reason why, because the report states very specifically, FEMA will decide whether or not to sustain the findings and have Guam Homeland Security of the Office of Civil Defense repay disallowed costs. Whatever the disallowed cost is, then it will be determined then what it could be. But it could be as much as 34.7. Correct? I'm just following what was written.
Yes,
okay?
and the correction. It's only 2015 to 2022 that was audited, not the previous years. There could be some more. There's more maybe in previous years.
Yeah.
But the period the Premier did their audit was only 2015 to 2022. We don't know what the amount would have been if it took it back to 2009.
So the 34.7 could be only 2015 to 2022. Okay,
Yes,
and
Mr.
the breakdown is here somewhere, right?
Yes.
Of exactly which year it started to grow. Okay.
That's just for those periods. We don't know about the years before that, nor
Or
do we know
after.
the amount of the years after.
Understood. Until I see a final report, we're just going to have to work with what we got. You know that, Speaker Cruz. We're going to work with what we have, and it's an alarming, 34.7, yeah. Especially after we supported a $31 million power rebate. I would hope in the future that anything that's kind of like knocking on your door,
They knew about this.
please knock on our door.
They knew about this when we had that.
Hold on, let me finish first, Senator Brown. At least let me know so that I know at what point I can speak on the floor. just so I know that, hey, let's slow it down a little bit, because, you know, you've heard me say this. Let's slow it down on appropriating too much too fast. And thank you, Speaker Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. We wanted to get this out sooner. It's just that our process doesn't allow us to say anything until it's been QAR'd and until we go through the process.
Understood. But 34.7 doesn't really require that much other than slow it down a little bit because there may be something coming down. And then that would raise the alarm on me to slow it down and convince others, let's slow it down, let's wait and see what happens.
Yes, I apologize.
Okay.
When we received the draft in February, and just for the senator's edification, the draft that we saw in February was also distributed to the administration. They've known that this thing is in the offing.
Okay.
And they were asked to make a response. They didn't respond until April. They didn't submit their management response until April. And so consequently, the Premier issued it in May 10th, and we tried to get ours out as soon as they did. They got theirs out. But I didn't know how much of the 34.7 was going to stand. I was hoping that the GHSLCD could have justified or disproven some of that, but they did not. And when Premier issued the report on May the 10th, we went into overdrive to try to get this out.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Jesse Lohan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, auditors. You know, as was mentioned, I think it was Speaker Cruz that mentioned, and was also mentioned previously, that monies were appropriated for the continuance of the $100 power credit to the tune of, what, 31 million. Had we known about this report, and I guess I should ask the finance chair here that had we known about this report, I think it would have made a difference in moving forward. My understanding as well is the questions were posed regarding any outstanding or any reports that may come out. I would assume at this point that testimonies that were asked in session by the senators that were posed to folks in the Committee of the Whole, that and prior to their testimony, they were sworn in. Speaker Cruz, you had mentioned that this information had been forwarded and was received and acknowledged as such. Is that correct?
I'm aware that in February, they were given a draft of the report, and they were asked for management response. I know that several people have received copies of that draft in February. When the final report was finally issued on May the 10th, I do not know personally who received it in the administration, but I would have assumed that that the response was received. I don't know how widespread it was, but some people had to have known.
Yeah, that being said, again, not knowing who received it, and the response that was given, again, not knowing, and I guess it could be found out, but that would constitute perjury. If in fact the information was received and folks knew about it, and again, whoever had received it and testified or was asked by the body during session, been sworn in, that would constitute perjury if in fact persons who were testifying had known about it. Do you agree with my statement, Speaker?
I can neither agree nor disagree with that, Mr. Senator. I'm not going to opine on that. Please.
You said a corrective action plan has been presented, right?
Yes, it's
Okay.
Appendix 10 in the audit.
Okay. In your, I mean, you said this is actually the first time that you've seen to this degree, right? Is that something like that?
To this degree.
To this degree. Okay.
34.7, I've never,
Okay.
that set me back on my heels. And
Okay. To this degree. That being said, to this degree, and the correction action plan that was presented, are you satisfied with the correction action plan? I know you mentioned you are, if in fact they follow through with the correction action plan, right?
Yes, no, I'm satisfied with the work that they went through. They went through every single report, and they listed the problems that were, or the issues that were brought up in each one of those reports.
Okay.
And then they broke it down into
Sure.
categories, and then they came up with an action plan.
Okay. With the deficiencies listed and all that, and moving forward and the action plan in place, how feasible is it, again, with this amount and with the deficiencies, how feasible is it for them to really undertake the correction action plan, in your estimation? I mean, again, not seeing to this degree the, I guess, the scope of the findings.
I would hope that they would make the commitment to do it. Transition committees in 2011 and 2019 knew that there were problems, and they could have and should have addressed those problems in 2011 and in 2019. It wasn't addressed. And I think we as a government have to make the investment in training people to handle programs. I was suggesting to the administration that a short internship of a program, of a grants manager from each of the departments, that they intern up at CEDARS or RCUOG, because they handle tens of millions of funds and have practically no question cost. So we need to make an investment in training, because the amount of money that we're receiving for the federal government is huge. And without the reports, you know, I'm concerned that we may have a major issue in the future. I mean, my office is currently doing an audit on the Medicaid program, and we're getting like $140 million from the federal government each year on that. And if they were to come in and do an audit and find that it was not properly, this would be nothing compared to that.
Sure.
So I really implore you and the administration together to make the investment in training our grants managers and our ASOs so that they keep adequate records, so that when an audit is done, the records are there. That's the problem, is that they couldn't find the records. Whether or not it was because they failed to do it or they purposely wanted to obscure things, we don't know. We'll deal with that when we do the second audit.
Yeah, maybe one of the solutions is that we require the the students at UOG to intern with the agencies, the folks that are, in your field of auditing and all that, to do their internships in the agencies or the challenge agencies.
Well,
So, I mean,
our
again,
administrators need to be-
short of actually investing, but a short-term cure, maybe, to something like that, versus the long-term, investing, of course, in making sure that people are trained in the particular offices for grants writers and things of that nature. I mean, I understand, and you're absolutely right, because this could affect, again, our federal funding in totality. And again, moving forward, because we're doing budget hearings right now, and so these findings right now is going to definitely make an impact on how we move forward with agency fundings now. Most especially, the decision that we just made last week regarding $31 million. And again, I know Senator Frank had asked previously, again, prior to our vote, asked that question continuously regarding, are there any outstanding findings, anything that will come and hit us blindside? And again, the answer was no. And so the body made a decision based on that.
I was not watching, so I can't comment. So.
Anyway, that being said, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Your Honor, Speaker, and the team, good morning. Thank you very much. Before I start with my line of questioning here, I'm just going to go ahead and just lay it all out. Yeah, it was me. But as much as I knew last week, the week before, the week prior, and the months prior, I wasn't going to base anything on conjecture and hearsay, and I wanted to respect what was happening. Okay, so the colleagues want to know. I knew about this since last week. But out of respect and no way recognizing that things were still in place, again, I wasn't going to say anything out of line. Okay, so that's me, not you.
We thank you.
You're very welcome. There are a couple questions that I haven't, and yeah. Well, one thing I did not see was this report. Okay, so I'm just going to base my line of questioning on what was presented this morning, because I want to go digest this as well. But there were some I guess, some statements made in the executive summary that I want to be able to clarify in this. First off, of the how much is 8.4 million in unreimbursed general fund? That is just what we found is unreimbursed from the general fund. Is that inclusive of the $34 million that's contained in the FEMA report?
No.
So it's 34 plus 8. So that's
Correct.
so we're looking at 42 million.
Probably 44.
44 million. And you mentioned here that of the 8.1 or 8.4, 7.8 were for Homeland Security Civil Defense Operations under EMPG, or Emergency Management Grant Program, and HSGP, which is the Homeland Security Grant Program, that have yet to be reimbursed by FEMA. Of the 7.8 million, 6.3 million were for grants that expired between 2019 and 2023. When did those grants come into play?
2018, 2019, 2020. And then
Okay.
they expired at the end of the year, and I don't know.
So now, of the 8.4 million, your next line says, of the expired grants, the general fund spent more than the grant award for the 8 grants, totaling $910,000. So what the general fund paid was $910,000 more than what the grants were for? I mean, the amounts?
Correct. And that's why we supported the finding of the Department of Administration's internal audit that was done in October of 2022, where it said that there weren't internal controls over expenditures, and nobody was checking the budget to see whether or not they had exceeded the budget.
I'm afraid to go on with more questions because I think this whole is getting deeper. Okay. Now, the question here, and here's the concern that I have. Right now, we're up at 8.3. In your findings, how are they being funded today? Can you speculate, or can you provide any insight as to how that's possible?
We believe that it's from the general fund.
But if it's, okay, so the general fund, but the concern here is, are they still under restriction based on what you've
Correct.
heard?
Since 2018, they have been.
So they've been under restriction since 2018. So 2018, we haven't been able to reimburse or recoup what we've been able to spend.
Haven't been able to, it's restricted.
It brings me back now I'm going to go back to now the top question here. And your first, despite claiming 100% federal funding for its operations, Homeland Security and Civil Defense Management and their certifying officers were aware of these FEMA-placed restrictions. How do we certify funds when we know they're on restriction legally?
I'm unable to answer that question.
I didn't think you were. Because if you can't draw down money, you don't have money. If you don't have money, you can't certify that you have money. But yet since 2018 or 2019 or just yesterday, whoever's certifying for Homeland Security and Civil Defense could be in violation of the law. That's a statement, not a question. One of the things that I haven't seen here, and do you have, and maybe it's within the your 100-page report here, is there's another program up there called the Fusion Center, Marianas Fusion Center, and they have specific grants for that. Did your study or did your audit also look into that program?
In our review, we only saw that there were problems in those two.
Okay. Yeah, this hole just got just 6 feet deeper. Last question. $34 million. Obviously, that was the report.
It's included with the HHCP.
Okay, so it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Fusion is.
Okay. $34 million. I'm just going to do some quick DI math. I borrowed your abacus, and by the way, okay. If you were to take the program, so you're talking about 2016 to 2023, right? What is it, Vince?
2015 to 2022.
2015 to 2022, so that's 7 years. What is the average, how much does Homeland Security, how much does EMPG and HSGP, what are they awarded annually as for their grants? If I remember correctly, it's around roughly about $1 million. Right? It's $1 million. So my abacus math says that if you were to multiply $1 million times 7 years is $7 million. Times 2, because 2 different programs, that's $14 million. This is $34 million, actually 42, now almost $44 million.
Their annual receipts are greater than that. The annual receipts, at least if we take it from what we were able to find, that they billed, was it 72? 72 for those 7 years, but only received a reimbursement of 64.
Okay.
62.9.
When did you begin this audit?
March.
In March. And so you basically took it took about 2 months to be able to do this. Assuming, also recognizing that there was already information that all you had to do was just go and get, right? I mean,
We had actually hoped to do a full-on audit of the expenditures. Unfortunately, because of the delayed response, we didn't get the information until mid-May.
are you talking about the Premier Group audit?
No.
Oh, you wait a minute.
When we did the engagement in
March.
In March, we gave them a list of things that we wanted, reports and all kinds of documentation. We asked for that in March. They said they would give it to us by the end of the month. At the end of the month, they wrote asking, you promised us the information by the end of the month. It wasn't received. They asked for an extension until April. We gave them an extension until April. That date came and passed without it being received. And they again wrote asking for...
Wouldn't it have been easy for them to be able to gather the information, recognizing the number of different audits they had from different agencies just within the last 4 years?
One would have assumed that all of this information was readily available because of the fact that they had just finished the Premier audit. They had done the internal audit from DOA, and there had been monitorings annually, but we don't know why the delay. I finally had to write a nastygram and include the governor and lieutenant governor in the email to get a response.
Okay, and you know, Mr. Chair, I think that for the purposes of moving forward in this thing and not digging a deeper hole, I'm going to ask in advance that, you know, after this round of questioning with my remaining colleagues, that we then, after they're done, is take a recess so that we can digest this information and come back again. Okay, so I appreciate. So I have a million more questions, but we don't. Okay. But I'm going to leave for my colleagues. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Thank you, Speaker, again. Senator Joanne, or sorry, take it back. Senator Tello, you're recognized. Okay. Senator Joanne, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't even know how to begin because the information you've provided is highly disturbing. We always seem to get the impression somehow that people working in government in some of these areas are just learning how to do their jobs, and yet they're supposedly hired with the expectation that they're capable and competent to perform the job to which they have been tasked. Are you of the opinion, Mr. Public Auditor, that the people of Guam may have to pay back $34.7 million to the federal government as a result of these audit findings?
I cannot answer that question. I do know that after reading the FEMA report, the Premier report, that the decision is now up to FEMA to make the decision. I'm not sure if there's going to be some other things taken into consideration. That's above my pay grade. I can only report that from what I have seen from the Premier report, that it is their recommendation to FEMA that 34.8 be repaid, returned from the government of Guam.
How do we get to this point? I mean, I assume most government agencies have annual audits. How do we get to this point over such a period of time that this amount of money becomes questionable? I mean, we all know, anyone who's run a government agency, particularly with regards to federal funds, not that our local public funds aren't as important, but particularly federal funds, that they be properly spent. And you're telling us that in some cases there's no documentation available to even determine or assess how the money was spent, or was it spent properly? Am I clear with that? I did hear it, but I just want to make sure and confirm that I heard it correctly.
And in 2021, the financial audit of the government of Guam, the GovGuam-wide audit of the government of Guam, did have a finding as it related to these two programs. Unfortunately, when we do the audit, they only take a sampling, and they'll make mention that there was an issue with this department, and there was a finding in 2021 that there was an issue with this department. You know, and as a consequence, then in 2022, the Department of Administration did an internal audit and discovered that $6.3 million had not been reimbursed since 2018, and that was just at that point. There have been some findings, but because it's just a sample, they go through thousands of expenditures, and we're going to have to now try to go through and look at all that to try to determine how much of that was or was not in accordance with the grant document. And so there have been some signs in the past. I mean, as I said, OIG reports have been saying that the financial report, the FFRs have not been filed, and the year-end reports have not been filed for many years, and it goes back since 2008, maybe even earlier. But just from what we've been able to find in OIG reports, that this issue has been pointed out in OIG reports, so much so that both administrations, their transition reports, actually made recommendations to them. Make sure that you hire competent people in these areas and this not be a political dumping ground.
Well, how does this play, for example, with the certifying officers that certify these funds then? I mean, who ultimately is responsible? I mean, we cannot administrate from the legislature. You know, we can't run the operational side of the government from the Guam legislature. And what I'm a little concerned with is an expectation that somehow the legislature now is going to make this problem go away by appropriating money to address improper spending, or now appropriate money to pay for the operations of Homeland because they have improperly spent their money, and the federal government now may move forward and say, we're no longer going to fund your operation because of improper spending of federal money. And somehow this becomes the cure-all for what may have been a long-standing problem and practices that have continued. That's what I'm concerned about, that we have to come in and wipe the floor and clean up the mess and take money that's critically needed in other areas of our government, especially if the federal government comes back and says you must reimburse this money because you cannot justify it, you know, that it's been properly spent. That's what I'm concerned about, or that's the expectation that
No,
we're supposed to come and do
I understand
that.
what you're saying, Senator. Maybe I was wrong in our decision to include and say that we believe that the operation of GHS OCD is important. It's critical. They address natural and man-made catastrophes. And with the Fusion Center trying to deal with the geopolitical concerns in the area, that's why we wanted to bring it to your attention. We're not saying the department should be disbanded. That's not our, we're recognizing the importance of both of these operations. And we're just saying, someone make a decision. Is it so important that we need to continue its operation? And if it is, then we may need to finally, honestly appropriate for it. We're just bringing this to your attention.
I understand you're the messenger, and we do appreciate you providing this information. Certainly, I think it is important to know if there is misuse and misspending of money in the government, be it local or federal. I mean, I think we all recall, colleagues, a year ago when we had this typhoon, the complaints that came upon this office because of what was viewed as a slow response, even though it's been 20 plus years since we had a typhoon. The slow response that we received from Homeland was not impressive. I think we all recall those discussions, and I don't know if that's another side effect of what is a deeper problem with regards to accounting for the funds, be it the previous administration or the current administration. I mean, once you have knowledge of it, then obviously corrective action should have been put in place because, I mean, if they've been public officials that have misspent public money, then by all means they should be held accountable. If they need to be prosecuted, they should be prosecuted. Because if the expectation is we have to take critical public money that as time goes on is going to decrease to pay for mistakes that have been made, I don't know if they're improper, illegal, incompetence, whatever the case may be, but there should have been accounting of these funds. There's a standard process to do that. People that certify funds also need to know what their responsibilities are with regards to certifying funds because they have a greater obligation of ensuring that the money's there and ensuring that the money's also properly spent. That includes the head of agencies that operate agencies if they have knowledge of it. If they have knowledge of it, then they need to take corrective action to address that. And that probably at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, when you bring the other agencies and certainly to our oversight chair also for Homeland Security, brings these agencies forth, we need to ask those questions and we need to find out because we cannot continue to cover these issues or address that simply we're going to appropriate the money and then those that have misspent money simply walk away as if nothing happened. I think that practice needs to stop because if that had been addressed at the very beginning, we wouldn't be where we are today. And that's very, very concerning that we have these amounts now totaling up to close to $43 million on an agency that we hear has an annual budget of what, $1 million? $1 million to operate?
I think it's probably more than that. I think it must be closer to 10 because of the $72 million that they billed between they received 63 back.
Well, I understand that they're receiving funds that they have to implement for emergency response, whatever the case may be. But I'm just talking about the actual staffing capacity of what it costs to operate. Do you know what that annual budget is just for their operations of their office and their staff?
It's never been provided. No, I don't know. It's not been provided. It's never had a budget that was presented to the legislature. There was a budget that was presented to FEMA, and we probably can find that, but the amount...
Well, I just think overall, I think we agree, Mr. Public Auditor, this is very concerning on the information that has been provided to us, and I'm sure at the appropriate time we will ask the administration, because as was brought up, this question was asked 2 weeks ago on the other side of the hall, because the appropriation was brought forth for the power credit And it was repeatedly asked, not by one, two, or three of us, because we kind of had an idea that this was coming down. And the response was no. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, if people that perjure themselves before the legislature need to be prosecuted, before public officials that come before this legislature testify, that they don't come before this legislature and lie if they have information. Because we want to make sure we look good at the expense of public interest. We rely on the information, Mr. Chair, that's being provided to us by these government officials to make decisions, particularly as we did 2 weeks ago, with regards to appropriation measures and ensuring that we are properly appropriating money to address the needs of our community. But when we have concerns of this amount come forth and being brought before to us now, today, just, not even 2 weeks later, and we were told, no, there's no other major concern or funding that's going to come down. No issues. We are doing just fine. And then to hear this information today, officially, you got to wonder. But then again, we're not keeping track, supposedly, of daily revenues coming into the government of Guam, because we don't know within 2 weeks that we're going to have $15 million. That's the kind of nonsense that comes before this legislature, and we're expected to take it seriously when public officials come before us and don't provide information that should be accurate. And the numbers supposedly don't lie. They should add up. So with that, Mr. Chair, I certainly look forward to the collective oversight hearing with regards to the information provided, because to say the least, this is highly disturbing. If there's legitimacy to the claims, and I have no reason to question the public auditor bringing this information forth to us, that this issue has gone this long and this amount of money is questionable on what is an operation that we should be depending on, especially because they do provide an incredibly important service to our people, particularly during the greatest time of need when we have natural disasters. We expect them to be there to assist and respond to our people expeditiously. And now we're hearing that there may be misappropriation or misexpenditure of a substantial amount of money that should be executed in the public interest is just very concerning. And I think we need to do a little more oversight and get to the bottom of where we're at with this so that we're not moving forward when these continued practices that bring up questions, highly questionable amounts with regards to audits that are being provided by both our public auditor's office and the federal government as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to ask questions and comment on this issue.
Thank you, Senator Brown. At this time, I'll recognize Senator Talo-Taitigui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank you for allowing us to have these questions before we release the OPA's office today, because I'm definitely sure there's a lot of people who are watching this in shock, have lots of questions to ask, so they are definitely going to be tuning in to the oversight on Homeland Security. Public Auditor, is Homeland Security under the Governor's office?
The chart that we've reviewed does have it as a
It is.
function, yes.
Okay, so money can be transferred in from the because it's within the governor's office. Can money be transferred in without legislative approval? Using her transfer authority?
I really can't speak to that.
Okay.
We
Well,
raised the question in our executive summary that we recognize that the Budget Act allows for a transfer of authority, but if there was never any appropriation to this agency
In the first place?
we're not sure whether or not the authority that you're granting the governor in transfer could be transfer outside of something that has never been appropriated for by this legislature.
Okay. Well, first, I want to also thank your team for the work that you've been doing, providing us this informational briefing. And many of my colleagues had asked great questions, and one keeps popping up, the timeline in which the administration was notified of this coming down the pipeline, and that you brought it to them in February, you brought it to them in April, and then you gave them the final draft on May 10th. Why didn't the OPA's office come to the legislature and tell us what's coming down the pipeline?
I'd like to make with all due respect, Senator, correction. The OPA received a whistleblower draft of the audit in February. That was done by an outside agency, Premier. We were waiting to see what the response was going to be from Guam Homeland, OC, Office of Civil Defense. When we finally received it in May, we received a copy of it on the 25th of May. It was published on it was released on the 10th. I don't know when they received it, but we didn't get a copy of it until the 25th. And so we went into overdrive to try to get this out as soon as we did. But I couldn't speak to this thing. There was a draft that didn't have a response. There was no final. I don't believe that I could
But
come
this is
and
not,
speak.
this is something that, in the past, we've gotten information that something's coming down the pipeline, that there may be an issue, there may be money that we have to reimburse coming down. Just to give you an FYI, before you go into session and spend $31 million on power credits. I mean, I just don't understand why this legislature, by May 10th, we were in session on the 20th of May, I think, if I'm not mistaken. We could have gotten this information, even though it's hearsay at this point, but it is real. We've got an auditor, other than your office, doing an audit on this. I mean, that's already, a red flag on the field. When you get FEMA hiring a private auditing firm to audit something is total red flag. We should have known this in May, by May 10th. That way, when we come into session, we can talk amongst ourselves, say, is this a real reality? No, probably not until we get the audit report, but you know what? Let's be cautious. Let's wait till the report comes out before we spend any money, or at least not double up the the power credit from 15 to 31. That's why I'm kind of perturbed too. I mean, we talk about the administration not answering our questions. Well, we should have known. Someone should have told us this is coming down the pipeline way before session. It mentioned earlier it's $34.5 million that is potentially owed to the federal government if they ask for the money, by the way. We're not sure, but it's recommended according to what you said earlier. I just wanted to make sure. It's $34.5 million. Is that $8.4 million included in the 34? No. Okay. So it's 43 million total. I just wanted to verify that. It is 43 million. 8.4 is owed to the general fund.
Actually, Senator, just to clarify too, that 8.4 million that we're talking about has already been paid out. It's a receivable that's sitting on the books over at DOA from the federal government because they didn't get the reimbursement back.
Right.
Because of the federal restrictions, the FEMA restrictions. So right now, the government of Guam is subsidizing, their general fund is subsidizing Homeland Security's operations with that 8.4.
Well, yeah, we're definitely going to have a DOA oversight too as well. It was mentioned earlier to using just for the listening audience, why not use APR funding, to cover this cost? Well, you can't do that. You can't use federal funding to cover federal money that's been given to us. That can't be done. So just everybody know that. We can't use ARP funding to cover this 44 million. Yep, supplanting. Who's the director of Homeland Security right now?
I believe the administrator's Estragi.
Okay. Why, you mentioned that Premier Audit did not allow you to attach, go ahead, please.
In the report, Senator, we have a list of all the administrators that have been confirmed to both of those positions.
Great, throughout the years? Okay, I'd like to also see individuals who were hired at Homeland Security who didn't even have the proper knowledge on how to push grants through. And you mentioned earlier about Mr. Estevez have a list on page 5, and I flipped to it, and all of it has to do with lack of training, turnover, were attributed to procedures not being implemented and followed, employees. Well, I'm going to save that for the oversight because, oh my gosh, I read through that. No wonder it failed. And this is under the governor's office. This is under her eye. So it says, Premier Audit was told you that they couldn't have you attach this to the report. So you didn't. But did you ask why? They didn't allow, it was their audit, they concluded their audit, but did you ask why they wouldn't allow you?
Yes, we did.
And what was the response?
They just, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so what we did was when we actually found or caught wind that the audit was completed, we did send a request to FEMA directly for the audit, and our understanding was that we could actually use the report. However, Mr. Estevez actually gave us a call just to clarify, because there was a section in that audit saying that there's a federal code that, that we don't want to violate if you issue this out without permission. So we did seek the permission from FEMA's representatives, and they said they had to go up their chain of command. Their response to us was, we can point to the report, talk about the report, but just not issue the report in its entirety because it is their, I guess, their intellectual property that they have. But however, for the purposes of any government official wanting to request for it, they could send the request in. So we.
But you're a government official, can't you request
so we got a
it?
copy of the report, but us actually issuing it out and doing as part of
So-
it's not public. I don't know how. I had to go through some sort of communication with them to get the report.
So it
but they
sounds
said
to
I
me-
couldn't get publish
Yeah.
it ourselves. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like this audit report, if you request it as a government official, you'll get a copy, but you're not allowed to give anybody else copies. So I would have to, as a government official, request it. So each of us is going to have to request. Can you please email us who we need to write and get that documentation of what, whatever we need to fill out the forms for, 10 or 15 pages of just to get that audit. Can you help us so we can get it?
And that audit, yeah, sure. Okay.
And I
It was
recommend
70
that.
pages, I believe, that report.
How many pages?
It was 70. We
70
actually
pages, but
initially, in our
for us
draft-
to request for documents, we're going to take us 15 pages to fill out,
Initially, we actually did include a copy of the report in this. So this report was actually more than the 172. It was over 240 pages
Right.
initially, but then when we did
Right.
take it out, we made
Retract it.
adjustments.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
So I
I-
appreciate if you can send us, so we can get that information ourselves individually. Well, pretty much, my colleagues asked some great questions, and I appreciate those questions that were being out. And again, I've been the biggest fan of the OPA's office. I appreciate that if anything comes down the line that you're not for sure, but it possibly can be, please let us know, because we're the ones that appropriate the money. Now we're going to find out how the governor was able to put money into somewhere we didn't appropriate. That's going to be a good finding fact for us. But again, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you again, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to ask some questions as we prepare for the oversight.
Thank you, Senator Talo-Tadigui, and thank you, Speaker, again for your presence today. At this time, I'll acknowledge my co-senator and oversight chair of the Homeland Security to advise some details. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask another question. This audit review was done, or a whistleblower, so somebody from this, a civilian made a complaint, and then they did the audit. Is that how this works?
I'm sorry,
The whistleblower, so it was a member of the public that had some issues, raised this, and did a whistleblower complaint, and that's how all this audit has come about. Is that correct?
that was correct. That was, I met with a person in Senator Bloss's office.
So should this see its way through, that person might have a financial windfall based on this whistleblower and federal law? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. I didn't know who the whistleblower was. I'm just asking. I just thought of this question, and I'm just asking if a whistleblower were to bring it to an attention of officials, there's federal law that actually grant financial benefit to a portion of what is discovered. Is that are you familiar with that?
I'm sorry, I am not familiar with that. I understand that there is a program, but I've never looked into it.
Okay, thank you, sir. I didn't know who the whistleblower was. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I mean, no disrespect. And secondly, I'm a glass half full guy. Is there any instance where a program or facilitations of the expenditures were done properly? Sir, you could ask, and anybody could answer that.
Well, of the 72 million that they asked for reimbursement, they did get 63 back, so.
Okay.
Some of it.
I just wanted to find out, I mean.
Yeah, there was just
are they completely, their work, has it completely a failure, or there were some instances where things were done properly?
They have a lot of programs under them. It was these two programs that had major problems.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Auditor. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nicholas. If there are no further discussions, and the committee appreciates your participation in today's joint informational hearing and briefing, I commend you all for your patience and being here today again, and your contribution to today's matters that we discussed. At this time, it is 12:07, and I will conclude today's joint informational briefing. We are adjourned. Take care. God bless, and Sidus Masi.